Hi, welcome to another episode of Hash It Out. This day is kind of unique in that we will be doing what we always do, talking about the passage that was preached Sunday, which in this instance comes from James chapter 5. However, I am joined this week, instead of Justin, got Mr. Eric Gunter making a guest appearance because he's an expert on all things we'll talk about tonight. Just a little podcast humor there. That being said, we will be talking, as we have the past few weeks, or every week, about the James passage, but only ever so loosely. In particular, what we want to hit is this idea James seems to just live by. The idea is that Jesus would return, or could return, at any moment. So he says twice in this passage. First he says, Jesus is at hand, his return is at hand, and then he's standing at the door. So he's standing there right at the door, waiting to enter when the time is right. So the implication is that it would be a very quick thing. It's very near to us. Eric, maybe an easier way to think about that, as you think about Jesus' role in redemption, redemptive history. So there's creation, fall, Jesus comes, dies on the cross, redeems us, and then he will return. So we're at the last step, only one step left. However, a lot of people make a lot about Jesus' return. So if we could talk for just a moment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just a moment on he is returning. Quite literally his actual return. So less about like the signs that he's coming back soon. When he returns, what does that look like? Have you ever thought about those things? Any thoughts on what his literal return would involve?
Yeah, I would think the Bible seems to make it clear that his return is something that is visible and that it's understood. Matthew 24 seems to steer us away from rumors.
Yeah.
And steer us towards you will know when this occurs. So I would say that however that would be, you would get the imagery of in the clouds, but that can be also apocalyptic. But however it would be, it seems clear that it would be something that would be known, that everybody, unbeliever and believer, would recognize that the time has come.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That it's going to be very obvious. It's not kind of covert, that he has come in a very demonstrative way, that he is, as you said, coming in the clouds of heaven. The Bible says he comes from the east. Yes, and then he would come to Jerusalem from the east. Any thoughts on coming from the east? Think that's a literal, or is it just metaphorical?
I would, me personally, would take that as somewhat of a metaphor. The sun rises in the east, and we would think of a position of in the east towards the holy city of Jerusalem. So I would think it would be metaphor. Of course, if you live in a place where you would be east of there, you would be looking west. And so I think we're not to be too hung up on that, but thinking about it more almost in relation of the sun. That is where the new day comes from. Yeah. That is where the new time, so to speak, that time of the Lord will be. Yeah, from that direction.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. If you're in China, you might look west. If he's like coming straight down, I've always pictured him coming at an angle, I guess. Kind of swooping in like a Boeing. Yeah. But that, I'll tell you who really believes it, are Muslims. Yeah. At Eastern Gate of the Jerusalem Wall, the Muslims heard that Jesus would come from the east and re-enter his temple, come through the eastern gate, so they walled it up. When they had control of Jerusalem, I don't remember at what point they walled it up, but when they had control of Jerusalem in 1100 plus time frame up till the 1900s, they decided we're going to put a stop to this. Really, they wanted to silence the hope that Jesus would come through the gate. Another kind of interesting fact that I do suspect you know, Christians have been buried looking to the east.
Yeah. Churches would build in such a way that the back was, towards the east.
Yeah. So churches or graves facing the east, you kind of see some gravestones now, but plots kind of at a peculiar angle, and then you realize, oh, it's facing the east if it's a Christian. So I think the hope is there.
Yeah.
I think, so I would say it's the same hope James seems to have. James seems to have, he could come at any moment, thought. How would we operate? You think there's a right or wrong way to operate if could come at any second?
So I think almost in some regard, looking for or being maybe obsessed with the looking for signs can almost be a wrong way to look at this, because you're just the idea of trying to pace yourself in such a way that you're having, here's the expectation, I got it kind of nailed down to this. Whereas the example I believe that Scripture seems to constantly hit over and over is always, always, always be ready. Mm-hmm. So not just, at this second while we have our Bibles open, but in the moments when nobody sees you, you want to go to bed with a clear conscience, so to speak. You want to wake up prepared to serve the Lord that day. It is a constant, I'd say, 24/7 awareness that any second the Lord could return, and you want to be in an upright position, or in a position that honors Him at the time that He does. You don't want to be caught dishonoring King Jesus whenever He returns. So I would say that Scripture, the correct way that Scripture, at least to me, the way that I've read it, the correct way appears to be that any second you should be ready. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the parable of the 10 virgins
speaks
was the
first one that came to my mind.
Yeah. Where half of them are not prepared for the bridegroom to come, the imagery of Jesus. The other half stay prepared. They don't know when He's coming. He may come very late in the night, but they stay prepared. I do think you're helpful, though, in saying looking for the signs. What I have run into is people seem to think I'm going to spot when we're getting really close. Like, I won't know the day or the hour, but I'm probably going to know the month. And so I'm going to spot when we're getting really close. At that point in time, then there are things that are going to kick in. So I think they feel like at that moment, I will then start telling all these people I know and love about Jesus, because He could come at any moment. So you better get out there and tell somebody. Instead of thinking I need to live in that position all the time, because I don't know the day, hour, month, or year. Right. So I do think it's helpful. I think that's one of the drawbacks of some of the, like the Left Behind movies from years ago, books, movies, all that kind of thing, is that there will be these anticipated signs, like having to do with weather and the seasons and all this kind of stuff.
Well, as you probably remember from Matthew, Jesus seems to teach that these aren't the signs of, like, right before His return. These things are going to happen, but then we're talking about something later down the road for the return. These are just things that will happen.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think that is helpful. So if somebody on the other end of the thing says, yes, I think You'll come back, theoretically, one day, I don't doubt His return. I just don't think it's going to be in my lifetime. I would say they're out of step, at least with James's stated expectation. He thinks Jesus is at hand, could walk through the door at any moment. So I believe it was the Lutheran group that put this out, but worked through the next 10,000 Easters, right? Because Easter's not on the same day every year. It's on the lunar calendar. So they worked through, or solar calendar nonetheless. So they worked through 10,000 years of mapping out. So they think it's not coming anytime. Why bother to work out 10,000? James would not have worked out 10,000 years of that. So if you're not, this has kind of pushed me a little bit. If I'm one who says He will come eventually, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. How does that impact my living? What am I potentially missing out on? Any thoughts of, man, if you don't live like James does, what would be a potential misstep for you?
So, I was even thinking as you were just now speaking that if, let's say I do suppose that we're looking a long way down the way. Like, we just got started. And we're looking a long way down the road before he returns. I would think still you would live your life in such a way that it could be your last breath even still. Like, so even if we're not talking about Christ's return where everyone sees him visible, it would seem foolish even then for that person to live in such a way that he presupposes that he will be here 5 minutes from now. So even then, I'm not sure that gets you, gets one off the hook to believe. I do think there seems to be a bit, though, where you can, I can see there being weaknesses on both sides. So I think there are some Christians, maybe some churches, who would see the return as imminent in such a way that they maybe take a sprint towards a certain end of, maybe it's evangelism or missions or something like that, and then burn out because they weren't prepared to run like a marathon because they didn't expect like it would go longer.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then there's the other extreme on the other side of somebody who is lazy in his faith. He's lazy in witnessing to coworkers or people in his community, and he takes a vacation because he doesn't believe that anything's going to happen anytime soon, and that would be another error. So I think that you got to hold like we got to know that it's possible that he could delay as is it Peter who says, because of his kindness, not wishing that any should perish, he could delay for that, and yet we keep building. We keep going right along with the mission. It's also possible that, yes, any minute, in which case you don't want to be asleep when he returns. So.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to say. If I'm tracking with you, you could fall off either side into the ditch and think, okay, don't want to sprint, as you said. I do find that maybe there's somebody out there sprinting because they think we're really close to the end. I haven't met them. I've met people on the other side primarily who think, well, it seems so far off. I'm not real worried about it. However, I'll give you the one thing that's hit me. Tell me if this makes sense. So I'm just kind of teasing this out. Every now and then you see somebody going through something really difficult. Maybe they have like a chronic disease or they're just a really tough road in life. And they'll say, man, I just wish Jesus would go ahead and come back. So I think they do start to envelop that hope. Another spot where I think you see it maybe on a broader scale. Antebellum South, black churches produced a lot of songs that reference Jesus coming. So one, just after slavery has institutionally ended, is Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. So it's like the late 1860s. Just prior to that, you have On Jordan's Stormy Banks I Stand, and it's the idea in the hymn is a eye towards Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie, I am bound for the promised land. So they're in this spot where they're oppressed and life does involve a lot of suffering. It seems to me that people in those instances live closer to where James is. So they live closer to, man, I wish he would come at any moment. Then I'm consistently not as close to it. There are moments where I think, man, I wish he would come in any moment for a variety of reasons. So how do we, short of just inviting suffering into our life, live closer to it? So I feel like I'm probably missing out on some degrees of that hope by not living close enough to that expectation. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, rephrase it.
Yeah. So I think some of those people that are going through suffering have a greater hope that he could return at any moment than if I'm just going about my daily life. My hope is not matching theirs in terms of the qualitativeness or in quantity, I guess, in some sense. But
yeah,
So,
think
yeah.
I got you.
So I've just been kind of kicking this idea around thinking, okay, is there something I would be missing by not living as close to an anticipation of his return?
So I think one of my areas of study, as we mentioned before, has been church history. And if you look at the first 3 centuries of the church, right, is probably the greatest suffering collectively until the 1900s, really. But you look at this first 3 centuries, and I think you would find this is where a lot of the doctrine on the Trinity is getting worked out, but stuff that would come later is not. And there is a huge sense, if you read their writing, there's a huge emphasis on holiness. You have even controversies arise in the church about what to do if people sin like after baptism. I mean, and we would think like, well, this is just expected. So, but it just goes to show you like there's this emphasis on holiness because of the imminent belief. So the early fathers of the church share a lot with James. They don't have this huge mapped out eschatology, but it is a sense of immediacy, like it's going to be any second, and so there is a sense of holy living and devotion to Christ that I feel just naturally comes with suffering, which would make sense in that God in the flesh conquers by suffering. The way to the crown in the Christian mind is through the cross. You don't get to the crown before the cross, and so Christianity is already uniquely married to suffering. Like this is part of, and I think that's what we miss a lot in our day and time because things have gotten rather good. And as things get good in various cultures, what tends to happen with Christians is they get lax as things get good. In some ways, that is working against us. It works against our holiness. And one thing we tend to probably do in those times is we turn towards deep, it can be deep and good theology, but it's very heady. And then we start like finding like unique esoteric things to divide ourselves on in these times whenever we're so prosperous. But I think, to your point, seeing these Christians who exist in great times of suffering, there is a sense in which they dig into the devotional life of Christ. They dig into the hope that is waiting in Him because they can't deliver themselves usually, and they recognize that. And I think sometimes maybe our lectures do us a disservice.
Yeah, I think so. I think the thought you brought up well there is really the spot we're living in now. It's almost hard to get your mind around. In some sense.
Like when Christianity became in vogue is whenever you start seeing the rise of like the monastic life in the history of the church. Like there's people who are recognizing that this luxury, that Rome's no longer hunting us down, is doing something to the life of holiness. And I got to almost put some kind of suffering on myself to try to keep a hold of this or preserve it. And Protestants, typically we would look at that and say that there's issues with that life too. But just to reiterate this point is that they did realize that there's something in the lack of suffering that is almost at war with the process of sanctification. So. Yeah, I think that's very good. I want to end with one final question, just as fast as you can. We're past time. Give me the year and date the world will end. When is Jesus coming back? Well, that could be 7/21 at 8:05.
Yeah, okay, well played. Any moment. It's been great to hang out with Eric tonight or this time on the podcast, and so we hope that you've enjoyed it. As I failed to mention, if you did not catch the sermon, it's in the description below, and then come back and check us out next time.